The fight over the future of a massive federal regulatory framework just got even bigger. Not only did the federal court handling a major challenge to this system just schedule oral arguments for later this month, and they actually revealed the exact constitutional questions that it wants answered during those arguments. And now a second major federal challenge has just been transferred into the very exact same court. And that transfer may be far more significant than people actually realize, because the judge handling the lead case is already examining whether this entire federal registration system can legally survive after Congress reduced the underlying tax on these regulated items to $0. Now another major challenge raising many of the same systemic issues is being funneled into the same courtroom, which means one single federal judge may soon be evaluating virtually every major constitutional argument against this modern federal framework. So let's break down exactly what just happened. Before we jump into the legal mechanics, make sure that you're subscribed and notifications are turned on, because this is one of the most important constitutional cases currently moving through the federal courts. Every week we're seeing some new developments, new filings, and now an upcoming hearing that could have massive nationwide implications for federal overreach. Now, if you've been following the channel, you know that this all started after Congress passed a massive omnibus spending bill. This law fundamentally changed the statutory framework by reducing the making and transfer taxes on these heavily regulated items, including suppressors and SBRs. This took it from $200 all the way down to exactly $0. That immediately created a massive constitutional flaw. Historically, the federal courts have only upheld this registration system because it operated strictly as a tax statute. The Supreme Court has repeatedly described this framework as an exercise of Congress's taxing powers. But here is the trap that just happened. If the tax is now effectively $0, can the federal government still legally require registration, fingerprints, mandatory approvals, federal databases, and also potentially felony penalties? That exact question is now being litigated in multiple lawsuits around the country. The strongest of those, in my opinion, is the DOJ case, which is currently pending in the Northern District of Texas. And as these massive structural battles play out at the federal level, it highlights just how quickly the legal landscape can actually shift and why you never want to actually find yourself navigating these complex legal systems without elite legal protection. And that is why I'm proudly partnered with Attorneys on Retainer. If you've been searching for a legal defense program, AOR, in my opinion, is the absolute gold standard on the market right now, because they are backed by an actual law firm and elite criminal defense attorneys. They are constantly expanding their member benefits to give you the most robust protection possible. So if you want to secure this peace of mind for yourself, check out AOR using the exclusive links down below. And also, if you use my code ARMSCHOLAR at checkout, you can get $50 off of your individual sign-up fee or $25 off of your family sign-up fee for a limited time. Now, speaking of the elite legal system and major showdowns inside the courtroom, let's look at what is exactly happening with the scheduling order that was just issued in the state of Texas. Recently, in this lead case, the DOJ case, the court officially scheduled oral arguments on the pending summary judgment motions. Those arguments are officially set to take place on June 23rd. This is incredibly important because this case is finally moving beyond just minor procedural disputes and heading directly into the core constitutional issues themselves. But the hearing date isn't actually the biggest story in this case. The real story is what the judge did along with that. The judge issued a highly detailed order laying out essentially the specific constitutional questions that he wants both sides to prepare for and to answer during those hearings. The court specifically wants to know whether the registration requirements for untaxed items can still be justified under Congress's taxing powers. The judge is directly asking whether a registration system can legally survive after the underlying tax has now disappeared. That is the exact argument that the plaintiffs have been making since this lawsuit was originally filed. The court also focused heavily on the DOJ's newest defense strategy that they put forward. As we've discussed recently, the government has largely shifted away from defending the system based on the now zeroed, making and transfer taxes. Instead, the DOJ is trying to desperately argue that the registration system remains constitutional because it supposedly helps to enforce a separate occupational tax that's paid by certain businesses. The judge specifically ordered both parties to explain whether these registration requirements actually aid in collecting that occupational tax and whether that issue is a question of law, fact, or a combination of both. This is a massive tell from the court. It shows that the court completely understands that this occupational tax theory is the government's primary remaining defense, and it's, their main defense line right now in this case. What's especially interesting is the judge is not limiting this case strictly to just the taxing power arguments. The court also demanded briefing on major Second Amendment issues. The judge specifically asks whether SBRs should really be treated the same as SBSs under modern Second Amendment doctrine. Furthermore, the court asks whether these items should receive full constitutional protections as items that are necessary accoutrements for the operation of firearms. These are monumental questions because they could potentially create independent grounds for striking down massive portions of the NFA, even if the taxing power claims somehow now fall. Now, here's where the strategy perfectly also aligns. A completely separate challenge known as the Johnson case has just been officially transferred into the very exact same court and to the same judge handling this GOA case. The judge just issued an order and he actually consolidated these two cases and he set them to be heard and argued at the same time at the same arguments on June 23rd. Now, the Jensen case raises many of the same kind of overlapping constitutional challenges. The plaintiffs there argue that the registration requirements can no longer be justified after Congress reduced the taxes to $0, and they challenge the framework under the Second Amendment. Now, you may be asking, why does this transfer matter so much? Well, Judge Kaczmarek, the judge that transferred this case, he explained that both lawsuits substantially overlap and that these constitutional issues must be resolved in a uniform manner. The court specifically stated that placing both cases before the same judge allows the court to evaluate all of the strongest legal arguments simultaneously to ensure a consistent, sweeping outcome. The court isn't treating these lawsuits as isolated disputes. Instead, they are recognizing that they are part of the exact same broader constitutional fight and they should be resolved at the same time. And now all of these lethal kind of legal arguments are heading towards the exact same courtroom at the same time. Instead of multiple scattered courts reaching different conclusions, one single federal judge will evaluate all of the strongest constitutional arguments. He will do that all together and then issue his outcome and his decision all in that single ruling. So stepping back, the biggest takeaway is essentially this. The Northern District of Texas is rapidly becoming the central battleground for all these post-$0 tax litigation cases. The court is not avoiding the merits of this issue. The court is not dismissing these challenges. The court is actively forcing the DOJ to defend whether this registration can survive without the tax. And now additional federal challenges are being consolidated into the exact same court in front of the same judge and will be decided all at once. Now that is potentially fantastic news, especially since the judge here appears to thoroughly understand the structural flaws with the DOJ's arguments and is taking these issues very seriously. And also, I want to note that the judge here, Judge Hendricks, has issued some very positive two-way rulings in the past. So the court handling this lead challenge has scheduled oral arguments in these consolidated cases, and that will take place on June 23rd. That means that one federal judge is about to evaluate two major challenges against the framework after Congress reduced and tanked their own taxing powers because they took the tax from $200 to $0. So the upcoming hearing is now looking even more historic. So as soon as we get additional information, new filings, the oral argument transcripts, and as things develop, or even if we get the final ruling, I will bring that straight to you guys. So if you guys like this legal breakdown and you found it helpful, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, share this video to spread awareness, and just drop a comment down below, telling me what you think about this current legal framework. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.